Well, tonight we're going to be flying through the book of Esther, and Esther is a beautiful story, a picture, as Israel and the Israeli nation is under captivity in a time of peril, tribulation, and through this time of peril and tribulation, one young woman steps up, Esther. And we see how God uses her in a beautiful pattern, a beautiful way. And this is an interesting book because God's name isn't used once in the book, but we can definitely see his thumbprint on this book, right? It's great. And I want to share with you a verse that is really key to tonight and to the interview we're about to have. It's Esther chapter 4, and it's in verse 14. And it's Mordecai speaking to Esther, and he says this: "Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" And I believe God has appointed people today that can help in certain ways that they might not know, and has appointed them for such a time as this. And we're going to be speaking with one such woman tonight who is actually the executive vice president for the Boys and Girls Ranches of Albuquerque, New Mexico. So put your hands together for Nikki Kull. Nikki, good to see you tonight. Well, Nikki, thank you for being with us. And first of all, I want to ask you a question. As a woman who has worked with the Boys and Girls Ranches as the executive vice president, what struggles have you faced in this particular role?
Starts with the good stuff, doesn't he?
Right into it.
Thank you. We started in 1970, and the world was a little bit different place in 1970. Women weren't often in positions of authority, and particularly in Christian organizations. And so I struggled a little bit with the fact that my husband was interviewed for the job, and I was talked to and brought along as sort of the part of the package, but not necessarily seen as a contributing part to that. And so that was quite a switch for me, and then to try to find a way to have an integral part in what was going on in the ranch, and finding a place where it's appropriate for women to serve and not to be interfering in some ways. Sometimes it's not an easy process to navigate. Definitely.
Well, from 1970 to now in 2008, how have things changed? How are you involved as the executive vice president from then and to now?
Well, what we finally settled on, my husband is the fundraiser and makes sure that we have the funds to care for the children that we care for, and I supervise the programs, and we work alongside each other, but we don't necessarily work in each other's territory.
Awesome. Very cool. You need both of them. Can't have one without the other. It's great to see that.
A lot of respect for each other in the process.
Yes. Well, as a woman, and we're studying Esther tonight, who was appointed as simply a young woman who was given this fantastic opportunity to serve the Lord. As a woman who's working with these kids and these youth that can sometimes be a very brutal battleground, in this position, what have you learned? What's some things that you've learned through this situation? Maybe some stories or something in particular that sticks out in your mind working with these kids.
I think the most important thing for me, and particularly from a believer standpoint, we used to say we were seed planters. We would hopefully plant a seed that would grow to fruition someday. And when Greg Nelson was working with us, he looked up one day and he said, you know, we really don't get to plant the seeds. We have to prepare the field. And the preparation of the field is not the most glamorous part of the project. You buy a field, it's got a lot of weeds, a lot of rocks, hard dirt, needs to be fertilized. That takes a long time, a lot of process. It takes a very long time for young people who have been hurt frequently by family members to learn to trust. It's very difficult to trust a loving God when your own father has abandoned you or abused you in some way. We don't start with what a lot of Christians would like us to start with. We have to start with the trust factor and getting young people to understand the anger that is a part of being abandoned. And it takes a long process. It's very time-consuming. You get rejected a lot in that process, but you have to remember it's not about you, it's about the children. Our job is to provide opportunities for young people to see themselves in a light that their family was not able to help them see. Once you've been abandoned by your family, it's very difficult to trust anyone after that point. And so there's a great deal of anger and frustration in the young people.
Definitely. And you know, interesting that you touched on that you were preparing the field. And I like that because once again, as we're studying this book of Esther, there may be people in here tonight who are ready for such a time as this that need to take part in this work, that need to, now that the field's been prepared, go plant the seeds and go see the seeds get reaped and see the harvest come to fruition. What are some things that people in here, if they're wondering how they can get involved and help, what are things that they could do?
Well, there's a lot of ways. One way you can help support people who do the work. Another way is that you can get involved and do the work. We certainly need a lot of people who will live with young people on a day-to-day basis. It's a very hard job. It's a very frustrating and time-consuming job. It's very stressful. It puts stress on relationships. But there are a lot of people out there who are prepared for that. You never grow quite as much as you do when young people are working with you because you don't hide anything from them. If you have a fault, they point it out very quickly. And they're happy to let you know what it is you're doing wrong. It holds you accountable in a way that very few situations can hold you accountable. If you say you are a believer and that you love people unconditionally, you have to prove it, and it's a very hard thing to do. We desperately need foster parents who can work with young people in their homes. We need house parents who can live on campus and work with the children, and we need people who will support the efforts. We don't take any government money, so we do all of our own fundraising. And so there's a lot of ways that people can help. And as I told you backstage, I'm not interested in whether you help us so much as you help young people. Our young people are hurting, and we need people who will reach out to them. It may be your grandchildren, it may be your niece and nephew, it may be your next-door neighbors. But somebody has to get involved in those children's lives and work through the rough stuff with them. And we need to step up and do that.
Interesting. Well, you know, being the high school youth pastor, whenever we go on mission trips to other countries, we always tell the students to take a snapshot of one picture in their mind of something that they've seen God do on this trip. And actually, we have a snapshot that you've given us here tonight, and should be on the screens in just a second. There we go. Why don't you tell us a little about this picture and who you're with and kind of the story behind this?
Well, recently, the Rotary Clubs in Albuquerque sponsored the Governor's Ball. And we were partial recipients of the funds from that Governor's Ball, and several of the young people went with us to the ball. And it was quite an experience for a young person who comes from an environment that they are not exposed to social situations such as this. We took the young men out to buy suits to wear to the ball, and one of them was so proud carrying his around, and he looked over at the staff that were with him, and he said, "Now, do I get to keep this, or do I have to give it back after the dance is over?" And that's heartbreaking for me. He also experienced things that night. He sat down next to a former governor and visited with him. We try to get kids a little bit out of their comfort zone, which that was quite a bit out of his comfort zone. Let them experience those things and grow a little bit. And while he was there, he said, "You know what, I'm going to buy 2 ties so next year I can go back again." So it was a really neat experience to watch that happen and see the kids go through that.
That's so awesome. Well, Nikki, on behalf of not only the congregation here, but on behalf of all of New Mexico, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing for preparing these fields, and I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that.